Imagine a world where two superpowers stand on the edge of everything, Rome and Carthage. The Mediterranean isn't just a sea, it's a battlefield, a treasure chest, and the prize in an ancient arms race. On one side, disciplined Roman legions and unbreakable pride, unstoppable enemies for any army. On the other hand, the cunning Carthaginian traders, master sailors, and warriors with a legacy stretching back centuries, mercenary warriors. At first, it's a struggle for trade routes and influence, but soon, it becomes something much bigger, a fight for the right to shape the world. The First Punic War ends in humiliation for Carthage. They lose Sicily and, with it, the confidence of the Mediterranean world. But Carthage is not done. Among their people, a young boy named Hannibal Barca swears an oath, at his father's side, to never rest until Rome is humbled. He will be one of the most able commanders in history. That vow becomes the spark for one of history's greatest military campaigns. Rome would suffer the consequences dearly. As the Second Punic War erupts and wages, Hannibal stuns the world. Instead of attacking Rome by sea, he takes the unimaginable route, marching his army from Spain, over the Pyrenees, through Gaul, snow, and finally, against all odds, across the Alps, in the dead of winter, war elephants, freezing soldiers, treacherous mountain passes. He loses half his army, but what survives is forged into steel. Rome, expecting an attack from the south, is utterly shocked when Hannibal descends from the north, ready to make Italy his battlefield. Hannibal is not just a fighter. He is a strategist without equal, a real fighter. He knows the Romans will always outnumber him, so he must use his brain more than his brawn. He chooses his battlefields carefully: rivers, lakes, hills, and forests. At the Battle of Trebia, he lures the Romans into crossing an icy river, then ambushes them from all sides, leaving the survivors fleeing in chaos. At Lake Trasimene, he uses the morning fog and carefully placed troops to trap a Roman army between the lake and the hills, killing or capturing thousands in a single morning. But it's at Cannae that Hannibal writes his name into the history books forever. Cannae, the day Rome almost died. Hannibal faces a Roman force twice the size of his own, and instead of fighting head-on, he forms his men in a gentle arc, placing his weakest troops in the center. The Romans, overconfident, charge straight into the trap. As the line buckles inward, Hannibal's elite African soldiers and cavalry swing around, closing the circle and trapping the Romans in a vice. In hours, 70,000 Roman soldiers are slaughtered or captured. Rome's enemies across the world can hardly believe it, the unbreakable republic, humbled in a single day. As news of Cannae spreads, cities in southern Italy begin to defect to Hannibal's side, seeing Rome as vulnerable for the first time in generations. Panic and despair sweep the Senate. Parents and children alike wonder if Rome will even survive the year. The world is holding its breath. Is this the end of Rome? But then, a question echoes through the ages. Why didn't Hannibal march on Rome itself? Why, after all these victories, didn't he deliver the knockout blow? Here's where Hannibal's story becomes legend and mystery. Historians debate to this day. Some say Hannibal lacked the heavy siege equipment needed to breach Rome's mighty walls. He had marched across mountains, but his armies were battered and his supplies stretched to the limit. Others argue he hoped Rome's allies would rebel, leaving the city isolated, would surrender. Some believe he simply understood that even after Cannae, Rome's spirit wasn't broken, and the cost of storming the city would be catastrophic. Rome's response proves him right. Instead of the Romans raise new armies, pass emergency laws, and vow never to negotiate. Rome would never accept a deal that left her weakened. Her pride, discipline, and iron-willed Senate simply refused. Hannibal continues to roam Italy, undefeated in battle but unable to force Rome to its knees. Rome, meanwhile, adapts. The Senate launches a war of attrition, avoiding major battles, and instead targeting Hannibal's allies, cutting off his supplies, and wearing him down bit by bit. Rome's politics, though fierce and often divided, are united in one thing: never make peace unless it's on Rome's terms. But Hannibal's genius is undeniable. He outsmarts Roman generals again and again, using the landscape like a chessboard. At every turn, he turns the enemy's strength against them. His soldiers, Spaniards, Celts, Africans fights not just with weapons but with their wits. Hannibal uses spies, propaganda, and diplomacy, trying to fracture Rome's alliances and win by brains as much as by blood. Still, the reality is harsh. Hannibal's army shrinks with each passing year, and reinforcements from Carthage are rare. The Carthaginian Senate, wary of his growing power, often leaves him unsupported, and as the Romans learn and adapt, his once shocking tactics become expected. Now, Rome decides to strike back where it hurts most. In Africa itself, enter Scipio Africanus, a bold young Roman general who studies Hannibal's methods and learns from Rome's defeats. Scipio takes the war to Carthage, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy after more than a decade of terror. The final showdown happens at Zama, near Carthage's gates. This time, it is Scipio who has the advantage. His cavalry is superior, and his troops know exactly what to expect from Hannibal's elephants and formations. At Zama, Hannibal's legendary luck finally runs out. Outflanked and outmaneuvered, his veterans fall. Carthage is beaten, Hannibal flees, and Rome imposes crushing terms. Carthage must pay enormous tribute, surrender its fleet, and ask Rome's permission before going to war ever again. But Rome is not done. Carthage did not rebuild as a rival to Rome, while the city itself wasn't immediately destroyed. The terms of the peace treaty imposed by Scipio Africanus crippled Carthage's military and economic power. The city was later destroyed during the Third Punic War. Hardliners like Cato the Elder repeat, year after year, Carthage must be destroyed. Eventually, Rome finds its excusa, minor breach of treaty, and launches the Third Punic War. The siege of Carthage is brutal, beyond belief. The city resists for 3 years. Streets become battlegrounds. Houses are set ablaze. The starving, desperate Carthaginians fight for every block. Finally, Roman soldiers break through the walls. The city burns for days. Tens of thousands are killed. The survivors sold into slavery. Legend says the Romans salted the earth, though the truth is less certain. The message, however, is clear: never again. With Carthage wiped from the map, Rome becomes the unrivaled master of the Mediterranean. The world changes forever. The Republic, flush with victory, soon faces its own inner demons: corruption, ambition, civil war, but its dominance is unmatched for centuries to come. Hannibal's story, though one of defeat in the end, becomes legend. His tactics are still taught to generals today. His name remains a warning to the powerful that no empire is truly safe. So why didn't Hannibal march on Rome? Because Rome wasn't just a city with walls. It was an idea, one built on pride, persistence, and the refusal to ever surrender, no matter how hopeless things seemed. And in the ashes of Carthage, Rome learned a new lesson. Total victory comes not just from defeating armies, but from breaking the spirit of your rivals. The Punic Wars didn't just shape an empire, they shaped the world. If you want to dive deeper into history's greatest battles, strategies, and the legends who changed everything, subscribe now and join us on this journey into the past, because every story has echoes that shape our future. After the fall of Carthage, you might think Rome's worries were over, but the legacy of Hannibal and the memory of the Punic Wars haunted the Republic for generations. Hannibal himself didn't simply disappear after Zama. For years, he evaded Roman agents across the Mediterranean. He found refuge at the courts of distant kings, even advising Antiochus, the third of the Seleucid Empire, always plotting, always looking for a way to turn the tables on Rome one last time. Rome, for its part, became obsessed with Hannibal. His name was used to scare children at night, and his tactics became mandatory reading for every Roman commander. In the Senate, the mere rumor of Hannibal's presence abroad sparked fear and debate. Generals and politicians constantly reminded each other, never underestimate him. But Hannibal's exile was a life of wandering. No matter how far he ran, Rome's influence spread wider. When his enemies finally caught up with him, rather than be captured, Hannibal famously took poison, reportedly declaring, "Let us now relieve the Romans of their fears by the death of a feeble old man." Yet while Hannibal's story ended in exile, the shadow he cast lingered over Roman politics and strategy. Rome, deeply scarred by the trauma of nearly losing everything, transformed from a republic of cautious, consensus-driven statesmen into an empire obsessed with security, domination, and expansion. Generals like Scipio and later Caesar and Pompey modeled themselves on the legends of Hannibal, studying his every move and adapting his tricks. The destruction of Carthage wasn't just a military decision. It was psychological warfare on a civilizational scale. The Romans didn't simply want to win, they wanted to erase their greatest fear. As Roman soldiers tore down the walls stone by stone, as fires raged for days, the message was clear: Rome's enemies would be shown no mercy. But what of Carthage's people? In the final siege, thousands of Carthaginian civilians were trapped. Food ran out, disease spread, and the once glorious city became hell. Mothers made desperate bargains with fate, and priests begged their gods for salvation. Some historians say the last defenders made a final stand in the great temple of Eshmun, choosing fire over surrender. The survivors, those not killed, were marched away in chains, sold off into slavery across the Roman world. Carthaginian culture, literature, and religion, once the pride of the Mediterranean, were scattered to the winds. Only a few relics, coins, and ruins remind us of what was lost. Meanwhile, back in Rome, the triumph was celebrated with days of feasting and parades. The generals, covered in gold and glory, rode through the streets as spoils of war were displayed for all to see. Statues, treasures, children played at Roman victory, but in private. Some wondered if Rome had crossed the line, becoming as ruthless as the enemies it once feared. The aftermath of the Punic Wars also changed the Roman economy forever. With new lands came new wealth, but also new problems. Landowners grew richer, slaves replaced small farmers, and inequality soared. Veterans returned home to find their farms ruined or taken over by the rich. Social unrest grew, paving the way for the political chaos of the late Republic. Militarily, The Punic Wars set a new standard for total war. No longer was victory just about defeating an army. It meant destroying an enemy's capacity ever to rise again. This mindset would influence Roman campaigns for centuries, from Gaul to Judea. The Mediterranean itself became a Roman Lake Mare Nostrum, RC, as the Romans called it. Trade flourished, cities grew, and new cultures blended. But the ghosts of Carthage and the legend of Hannibal never quite disappeared. For centuries, Roman children were warned, Hannibal Barca is at the gates. In the end, the story of Rome and Carthage is more than a tale of battles and empires. It's a lesson about pride, resilience, and the cost of fear. The world that Rome built on the ashes of Carthage would shape the West for millennia. Its laws, roads, language, and dreams. But the price was high, and the warning clear. Even the mightiest can fall. So next time you look at a map of Europe, or watch a parade, or read about ancient wars, remember behind every empire lies a city like Carthage, a general like Hannibal, and a lesson history refuses to let us forget. If you want to keep exploring the secrets, stories, and turning points that made our world, hit subscribe, share this video, and stay with us for the next chapter in the epic of history.